we make up the TQS team. And so we're going to be starting to talk about the Abridged Reaccreditation process, and we're going to give it like 1 more minute and then we'll get started. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So just a few logistical things about today's webinar. This will be a pretty short webinar, but it is going to be recorded, and we are actually on new technology, Zoom. So first of all, thanks so much for your patience while we moved everything over to Zoom. I know that you probably received numerous invites for this webinar. And then secondly, thanks for your patience as we kind of try to figure it out. You all should have been I believe you have the power to unmute yourselves and mute yourselves. There's also a chat feature, and so we'll be taking questions throughout, and you can do that either via the phone asking a question or via the chat feature. So there you go. I didn't know, as I mentioned, my name is Julie Dennis, and I'm joined by Kelly Mears and Dana Smith. And Dana, I just didn't know if you wanted to just quickly introduce yourself and kind of let folks know who you are in this semi-new role.
Sure, happy to. Can you all hear me? Maybe?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, making sure. So for some of you who have gone through TQS before, you're probably more familiar with Chris Murray. He is still in our national office. He has just taken on some of our innovation work as a part of our business plan. And I have been with the org health team for the last few years. And we are doing a little bit of transition work to incorporate the org health work through TQS. And I've been responsible for the TQS for the last, I guess, 6 months or so. So as a part of figuring out the recalibration effort for TQS, we came up with this abridged plan. So we welcome your feedback and also hope to figure out a good strategy going forward for the next iteration of TQS. So anyway, I've been with the organization for about 15 years. I've been with the national office for about the last 4. Some of you I know really well. Some of you have probably never even heard of me. So I am Dana. I am excited to walk down this path with you guys and figure out a path forward.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to what our agenda looks like today. So overview of why abridged process for 2020. What standards will be included. We're going to give you the reaccreditation timeline, and then, of course, answer any questions that you have. Please note that this is not the box.com webinar that we typically do for reaccreditation. That will be coming at a later date, and you'll see when that is in the timeline. So why abridged? So in order to understand where we're going forward as an organization and as a federated network, I wanted to just kind of quickly remind us of where we've been. So in June of 2015, we had the network accredited under, everybody had to be accredited under at least what we dubbed TQS 1.0 standards. And then we released 2.0 standards in July of 2015 with student support standards and January of 2016 with affiliate business standards. And then we started what we were calling TQS 2.0 reaccreditation with our 2017 cohort. We continued through with 2017 and 2018, having a June 1st deadline for both of those years and for both of those cohorts. And then in the fall of 2018, due to some realignment with our strategic plan, on which we are currently mid-year 2 of that 5-year strategic plan, we decided to do a recalibration effort of the TQS standards. We'll talk about that more, but essentially what you might not have known is that we paused for the 2018 cohort and got back to them a little bit later than we anticipated. And then for the 2019 cohort, they were pushed out. So instead of that June 1st deadline, we actually have an October deadline for our 2019 cohort. And then, of course, the 2020 cohort are the abridged reaccreditation. And so we'll talk more about that. So why did we recalibrate? Kind of just understanding a big picture. For some of the folks who are state folks, you've probably seen this slide numerous times, but I think for some of our 2020 affiliates, this might be the first time. So we just kind of wanted to give you an idea of why we decided to recalibrate. First and foremost, we as a national organization, as well as all of our affiliates, are constantly trying to improve. And so we wanted to think about TQS as a way to continuously improve upon ourselves, upon our practices, and upon the work that we do with the students that we serve. So we have the strategic plan, and essentially we needed to align the TQS work better with the strategic plan that we were entering into. And so we decided to do a recalibration, as I mentioned, in the fall of 2018 on the standards. And so those standards that are recalibrated are the ones in which we will be discussing a little bit today, and the ones in which we'll be holding you to for reaccreditation 2020. So again, this continuous improvement idea, so we had this network input on the standards for TQS 2.0 and recalibration. As I mentioned, in January of 2016, we had the TQS 2.0 launch. In October of 2018, we decided to pause reaccreditation where it was and recalibrate. And then that recalibration finalized in January of 2019 with the recalibrated standards coming out and being available for our entire network to read and peruse. As Dana kind of alluded to, we do have a next iteration of TQS, and we're not quite sure what that will look like, but that will be coming down the line in approximately the year 2022. And of course, we definitely want to make sure that we include our network in that iteration and get your feedback and thoughts about these standards. So that's kind of the recalibration and why we decided then to do an abridged reaccreditation for the 2020 cohort. So again, as I just mentioned, we kind of think that this new iteration of TQS will be available in 2022, but we currently have an end goal similar to that June 2015 TQS 1.0, getting all the affiliates through. We are mirroring that and having an end goal of all affiliates being reaccredited under TQS 2.0 by December of 2020. And so due to some circumstances, this cohort is a little bit smaller, which is totally fine, small but mighty, but you all are the last to go through the TQS 2.0 reaccreditation. And so that's kind of the goal and where we are and why we decided to go through an abridged reaccreditation process for the year 2020. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to Kelly. She's going to talk a little bit about these recalibrated standards and where to find them.
Absolutely. So we're hoping that you already had a copy of the standards, be it before the recalibration or have somehow received a copy of the standards since the recalibration. But if you haven't, don't worry. They are available for you on the National Resource Center. So of course, on the National Resource Center, you're going to use that same password we've been using, empower, all in lowercase, to access the NRC. And just go ahead and follow our website there to the accreditation process and standards page, and select affiliate standards from there. From there, you can access not just a download of these standards as they've been sort of recalibrated, but also some summary documents, some webinars, and other resources, particularly about the additional requirements that are really helpful. So I encourage you to go check that out, and just to make sure that you're frequenting that page, just to see as we put new resources up there. We usually ping you, send you an email, or let you know on Yammer, or all of the above, that there's new resources up there, but definitely check that out as you undergo this process. All right. As Julie mentioned, the standards themselves kind of held the same intent behind them, but they are sort of different in some of the requirements of them. So definitely encourage you to get that newest updated copy and pin them up on your wall or print them out, peruse them every day like Julie and I do. So who is up for abridged reaccreditation? Julie mentioned you are a small but a mighty cohort. So we have 9 folks who are affiliates who are going to be going through the process this year. Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia is being represented through this whole cohort. Again, there is nothing about this cohort that necessarily says that you are a problem because you are the last affiliate cohort to go through. Simply the way that the years added up, the numbers added up, and the timelines added up. So we're really excited for you to be able to get through and kind of undergo this TQS 2.0 process as we build into the recalibration and figure it out. You are at an advantage because we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 3 years about what is helpful for you all, what resources you all may need, but we want to just be available for you, and we also want to help facilitate conversation amongst the cohort. So you'll see up on the screen there are all of the affiliates who are listed either present on this call or who have let us know that they're not going to be on the call, and so they're available. I'm also going to be going through this process. So please reach out to your colleagues and make sure that you know what tips and tricks that they have to offer about either making this process easier, about document uploading, or just about doing their work in the excellent ways that they are doing.
Great. And so now I just wanted to pause for questions if you had any questions kind of on the recalibration, the abridged reaccreditation, kind of anything like that.
And if you feel more comfortable adding a question into the chat box, if you hover at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a nice little conversation arrow with 3 dots, conversation bubble with 3 dots, excuse me, and you can go ahead and type in your questions there. You can type them in at any point throughout the rest of this call, and we will go ahead and monitor that as well.
Okay, so we'll just move ahead then to the standards for abridged reaccreditation. So we have our business standards. Currently, we have 38 business standards if you kind of go through them start to finish. And we picked 12 standards from those 38 that will be reviewed for the abridged reaccreditation. The way that we picked the standards were definitely based upon their importance to the CIS brand, adherence to best practices, risk to students that we serve, and really making sure that there's the risk to students that we serve in particular, ensuring that we are doing everything in our power to prevent any issues with students. So I think that you probably are more curious about what they actually are. And so here's the list of those 12 business standards. So we have 1.4, branding and communications, 2.1, your bylaws, to make sure that you are doing everything that you say that you're doing, 2.7, strategic plan, 3.1, financial management policies, 3.4, audit, 4.5, data management, 5.1, personnel, 5.4, screening procedures, 5.5, background check procedures, 4.6, data verification, 4.7, parent guardian consent verification, and then 5.9, volunteer policies. So those are the standards. I will say that we will be going into more detail about what needs to be specifically uploaded with them during the box.com webinar. And so that will be, as I mentioned, at a later time.
And I'll add to, as an affiliate operating communities and schools, we do expect you to hold to all of the business standards at all times, not just during your reaccreditation year. And since your reaccreditation year falls this year and we're doing the abridged version, you are still expected to meet all business standards that are in that standards document that I just alluded to. However, these are the standards that we will be going through and verifying. So we may ask you questions. We're going to be doing some interview processes and communicating with you all. We do hope that you are able to meet and make progress towards all standards. But these are the ones that we really selected and identified as like Julie said, high risk, attention to brand, and really kind of keeping our students foremost and forefront here.
Can I add one other thing here too, Julie? I just want to make sure everyone is aware the numbering that is on this slide is in alignment with the updated and recalibrated business standards that Julie just talked about that happened in the fall. So if you happen to have an old document that is not freshly off of our website in the last 6 months, then you'll probably see some different naming conventions and numbering as well. So just be aware of that this is a part of the numbering should align with our recalibrated business standards that Julie referred to earlier.
All right, so those are the business standards. For the student support standards, So student support standards usually can be verified in 3 different ways. The first way would just be a box.com upload. The second way would be strictly looking at the TQS report via SysDem. And then the third way is a hybrid of the two, looking at something in box.com as well as a SysDem TQS data report. So we will be reviewing for up to 5 schools the student support standards, most of the student support standards. But again, if you go into these particular standards, some of them only are verified via the TQS data report, some of them are only verified via a box.com upload, and then some of them are verified with a little bit of a hybrid. So we'll be looking at student support standards 1 through 4. We will not be looking at 1.5. It has to do with branding in the school, and it's just something that we can see via other ways. Student support standards 2.1 to 2.6 and student support standards 3.1 to 3.5 will all be reviewed. And then we'll be doing that for up to 5 schools of those particular standards. And then for all schools, we always pull a TQS data report and look at all schools and make sure that anything that can be verified via the TQS data report is done so at that time. So the thing to note here is that we will not be reviewing reports for the standards 4.1 through 4.3. Those are the periodic reports to school leadership, CIS leadership, and then the school support team. And in the past, we've required folks to upload, affiliates to upload templates or actual copies of reports, and we will not be requiring that box.com upload for the purposes of the abridged reaccreditation. For the general use services, so the only thing that we will be checking for general use services is the consent form, and that is also checked via SysDem data. So there isn't really anything additional to do as long as you're entering the general use services into the data system, into SysDem, then you will be fine here with this. And just remember that a GYS general use services site is one where there's really no intention to fully implement the model. While some students may be case managed, primarily how we classify a GYS is that there's no intent to implement the model fully, and therefore that usually means that most of the supports are tier 1, and that's the primary focus. So that's kind of how we make the distinction. One of the things that we implemented a couple of years ago that we'll be continuing for this year is that every affiliate will receive a reaccreditation liaison. And so the liaison is somebody from CIS National who's willing to and able to walk you through the process and answer any questions that you have. So if you are currently wondering if you have a GYS site or if you have a model site, that's a great question as we kind of get, as you get familiar with your reaccreditation liaison and get introduced, to ask him or her.
Yeah, I'll note here, I think it's helpful to know that you will be given resources here that breaks down what's required for each standard. We won't leave you high and dry. We'll make sure that you have some of those resources that guide you through the process. And really what's important at this stage is that you're looking at your schools and at your services to identify, like Julie mentioned, is this a general use services site? Is it a CIS model site? How is it classified in SysDem? And then really identifying any challenges that you are experiencing to date currently with SysDem and your data entry in that system, because we will be looking at data practices over the entire school year. And so if you're having challenges now, we'd like to help you get ahead of those challenges so that we know that when we go to review that data report, we're looking at the right schools. You have your general use services sites appropriately labeled in SysDem, same with your CIS model sites. And same goes for the data that are being entered for each.
So typically we do additional verifications and site visits for a cohort going through reaccreditation. And at this time, we are not planning on any site visits nor additional verifications for the 2020 cohort. I will always say that there's the caveat that if we always reserve the right to add site visits or verifications to any affiliate, but right now there is nothing currently planned. So that is not on the schedule, and so we'll just proceed with the abridged review as minus the site visits and verifications. So then I'm just going to walk us through the timeline, and then I'll take time for questions. if there are any. So today we have an intro webinar. So this is really, the goal here is just to include and make sure you understand an overview of the Abridged process and the timeline. So kind of, hopefully that's what you've gained from this webinar. We will be having a Box.com webinar in the winter. We are still going to, obviously we'll be letting you know ahead of time. You'll be able to register. And so that will really get into the nitty-gritty of where you upload different things to which box. And that will be a much more in-depth webinar, probably an hour to potentially an hour and a half, that we will schedule, again, with plenty of notice for you to attend. And of course, it will also be recorded. Then, of course, shortly after the Box.com webinar, Box officially becomes open for you to upload any of your supporting documents into Box with a close date here of June 1st of 2020. So you will hopefully have all of your documents uploaded by that June 1st date. Then we'll kind of take, from a national perspective, a review period. We're very fortunate because of the size, I would say, of the cohort. We anticipate, hopefully, that it won't take us quite as long as a typical reaccreditation cohort, which is typically 35 to 40 affiliates. It won't take us long to review. So we're anticipating that by late summer, we should be able to complete the review. We take the review to the TQS Governance Committee. Just a quick refresher, the TQS Governance Committee votes on all things accreditation and reaccreditation, and is made up of 7 folks from both CAS national senior leadership as well as state and state leadership throughout the network. And so they would vote in the late summer of 2020, you'd receive your extension then at that time and hopefully be reaccredited no later than December of 2020. As I think we've discussed in the past with TQS 2.0, we, as kind of the cohorts, as we got further and further away from when we released the standards, the extension periods kind of went back to what we're typically used to in previous accreditations and reaccreditations, with 90-day extensions being typically what we're seeing. Are there any questions there about anything?
Julie.
Yes.
Can this PowerPoint please be provided to the state offices?
Oh, sure. I can, I'll actually probably send out the PowerPoint and the recording if it's not too big. I typically do that with different cohorts, so absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't think I see anything in the chat.
Julie,
if there,
quick question.
Oh, sure. Yes.
It's Catherine. For the 5, so it sounds like for the student support standards, schools will be reviewed in system, and there are 5 schools that will need Box.com uploads. How are those 5 schools to be selected?
Great question. So in case folks couldn't hear it, so we look at all schools in system, and then she's asking for the 5 that require a Box.com upload, how are those selected? So those are selected by the affiliates themselves. They usually pick the best 5 or 5 that are however their criteria for deciding, but it's up to the affiliate.
Yeah, oftentimes we see affiliates that are selecting schools that they have strong relationships with, that they know that they can go back to that principal and ask for additional documentation if needed. It's not common that we have to do with that, but we do want to just make sure we have a clear indication of how the standards are being met at that site based off of the documentation provided. So oftentimes we see, maybe a slew of a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school, so that we can see the type of diverse programs that are happening at that school, and or schools that the affiliate has been in for more than 2 or 3 years, so that there's an established relationship.
Great, thanks.
Well, there's my contact information. Please certainly feel free if you have any questions, comments, concerns, to reach out to me at the email address there provided. Like I said, this was just supposed to be a very brief overview of the standards included and kind of why we have this abridged reaccreditation cohort. Certainly, as we get closer to that Box.com webinar date, we'll be in more communication with the affiliates and, of course, with the respective state offices about this. And as we ramp up, of course, toward the 2020 due dates, things like that, you'll be hearing a lot more from us. So in the interim, please feel free to reach out. But otherwise, thanks so much for your time today. And I will definitely send, as I mentioned, this PowerPoint is being recorded, and so I can send a copy of the PowerPoint and the recording to you all once it's done downloading.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.